Well, hi, folks. Welcome back to Tim's Take, and we're continuing our discussion with Dr. Zach Leeser, our state extension climatologist. But now we're going to talk about the Mesonet and some neat things that you're going to be starting here real soon.
I definitely wanted to talk about an exciting project that we're working on with the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. It's called the Missouri Hydrology Information Center, or MOHIC. There's a lot of different... MOHIC, that's correct.
Missouri HIC.
Yes, but no, MOHIC is a really exciting project. It involves more than just the Mesonet and the Missouri Climate Center, but our part is really exciting because we're working on soil moisture monitoring and expanding that across the state. And so this is something that's really important here in Missouri, but honestly, all across the plains and the Midwest, these states are taking initiatives like Missouri to invest in more soil moisture data, to learn more about what happens after it rains, whether that rainfall is getting into the soil, and monitor droughts and floods as well. So lots of exciting things with soil moisture we're working on right now.
Because on the Mesonet, describe that real quick.
Yeah, so the Missouri Mesonet has been in existence since the mid-'90s, but it is a network of 47 automated weather stations across the state of Missouri. So these automated weather stations mean that they provide lots of different weather data, so not just rainfall, but temperature, humidity, winds, even some soil temperature data and other variables, but every 5 minutes. And then these data are available free online at the Mesonet as well. And so so these stations have been in existence, and they're good for real-time, decision making. If you need to see if it rained last night or check the winds before you go out, that data's right there. Certainly helps to monitor severe storm events. But I think the real value has been now that we have the climatology with the Mesonet too. So the Mesonet has been in existence long before I got here, and the previous state climatologist, Pat Gannan, and John Travalos, who still manages the Mesonet, they've worked a long time, and some of these stations now have 30 years of data, and that's a local climatology. It's measured right where you're working or studying, and that's important because we know weather can really vary over short spaces. And so at those locations, we've got the local average annual rainfall, how much we expect each year, but also based on temperatures, we know the probability of frost dates and planting dates as well. So you start to build all of this decision-making information once you've invested in collecting that data for a really long time.
Because one time we were talking about how you start talking about drought, that's changed. Because are you talking about compared to 1934? Well, it's pretty wet this year, because we have those severe droughts. So we have to compare it to something, and now you got the data that you can compare it to.
Correct. And it's recent data, too,
right,
that we're always adding to. And it's so important for things like drought. One of the things I work on as a climatologist is how do we define drought? And we know drought is less than normal precipitation, but we need to know the normal there, too. And so that's one reason to have a climatology, because we can look at for example, Sanborn Field, the two driest years, 2012, which everyone expects, but kind of surprisingly, 2023 at
yes,
Sanborn was drier, and that kind of context is really important. Now, it does get tricky, though, and that we kind of look at the past 30 years as a normal, or once we feel confident in a kind of statistical baseline to compare against. But sometimes that normal is changing too, which makes drought assessment really tricky here. So long-term data, though, really help to tell the story with drought.
Sometimes even if you go, well, we're talking about just the growing season, but I think in 2012, it was terribly dry. In the very last couple of days of August, we got a hurricane remnant, and we got a big 1 8 inches rain. Well, that kind of changes your monthly totals a little bit. It skews them just a little bit.
Yes.
So you almost need to look at by day or week or something.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And the Mesonet gives us kind of more, I've mentioned localized information, but oftentimes better resolution information for getting rainfall and other things. And so a lot of times, most of our rainfall and snowfall data, when you see it on the news, for example, is coming from a rain gauge observer. Maybe it's a National Weather Service or a volunteer observer. But these are usually going to be once a day, just rainfall totals, or they will report snowfall too. That's a lot different than what the Mesonet can show. We can show 5-minute rainfall data and look at things like the intensity of the rainfall, and then look at the month as a total, for example. Did this rain come an inch a week, kind of how we would want it, or did it stack up as well? Those are all reasons you want to keep as high quality of a record of the data as you can.
I know I look at yours all the time because I look at about 4 of them in this area just to try to see how scattered is the rain and such. And sometimes when I know a big front's coming, I'll look at some of the ones that's already passed. Like, what did they get at Linnaeus? For example.
Absolutely.
Because it's coming this way, so I'll look, or at Marshall or someplace, and they only got a half inch. That means I'm not going to, this is moving so fast, I'm not going to get much.
Yeah, and that real time's great for that. And you can also see if a front's coming through, how cold is it getting behind there. And for severe weather, unfortunately, we often pick up a lot of wind gusts that go into, a severe storm local report if we get a 50 or 60 mile per hour gust too. So really capture quite a bit of information.
Well, we've used your data for insurance claims.
Yes.
To say it did get to 60 miles an hour. Here it is.
Yes.
So that helps too.
That's what they're designed to measure, but they do unfortunately get impacted by severe weather. And over the past, we've also seen hail, hit the weather stations and cause repairs, and even tornadoes as well.
So you're going to be monitoring soil moisture then?
Yeah, so that's kind of the next variable. So in the past, the Mesonets at a few stations set up some projects to measure soil moisture, but only at some shallow depths and for a few locations. With this MOHIC project, so the Mesonet and John and his team are looking at installing soil moisture sensors at about half of the stations across the state. Really, a lot of us have been making an evaluation of which stations. Some of the locations, because of the topography and the site, or maybe the soil's been disturbed, it's just not a good site for soil moisture monitoring. And then in some locations like Boone County, we might have some redundancies, so pick just a couple spots. Right. But it should be about half. And in fact, that's already started. So DNR is really leading the charge on digging and installing the sensors. And so the first installation was this fall at South Farm. And these sensors are 15-inch soil moisture probes. And so you would see 2 metal probes, and they go horizontally into the side of a soil profile. And so these are being buried at 2, 4, and 8-inch depths, which are really important near the surface for soil temperatures and some shallow root zone moisture, but also down to 20 and 40-inch depths, where we're going to see a lot more slower response to moisture there as well. And so that'll be soil moisture and temperature data at all of those depths in real time as well. So by next season, we really expect a lot of these data to be available, and also some tools we're building on top of the soil moisture as well.
You'll have a grass crop or something growing on top of it that'll suck the water out.
So yeah, these will not be under bare soil. So these will all be buried under sod. And so that will be important to consider, and that this is going to reflect the soil moisture responding to the weather if we just kind of let it be under sod and mow occasionally. So this isn't going to take into account management like you would in a crop field of the soil moisture, or plant water use of something that uses a little bit more water than sod, like if you had corn or soybeans. So there will be some kind of communication and learning how to use that soil moisture for crop management as well, but I think it'll be very important data.
Oh, it will, because we can see, what I'm interested in is how much our deeper profile gets depleted.
Yes, and I think that's a very relevant question to right now, where we've been in a drought and we just received some rainfall in September. We can go outside and make a quick assessment, see things have kind of greened up, and you can look at the soil and know that the topsoil got wet, but how deep did that rainfall infiltrate? Did we really get into the subsoil and recharge the moisture? that's what these sensors can tell us there. And it is fascinating to see the moisture at different depths because the top will respond pretty quickly after a rainfall event, but you kind of get a better idea of the total water storage for those deeper depths that take a little bit to dry out or moisten as well.
Well, as we discussed last time, over the winter is when you can replenish some of that subsoil moisture.
Yes, there is a kind of seasonal cycle of soil moisture in that by the spring we call it a moist plateau, where usually on average your soil moisture is you've got full saturated soils from a wet spring, and then usually we see that soil moisture decrease to a minimum in the fall just because of plant transpiration and evaporation, and then on average we recharge the soils during the winter. And so a lot of people think soil moisture in growing season conditions, but then we're looking down into the winter and we will have the data to watch, how much is that soil moisture recharging? Are we getting over these winter months rainfall into the deeper layers? And that can be tricky because in Missouri on average, we don't get, a deep frost depth and see these frozen soils for a long time. But we do see periods where we'll get cold and then have rainfall on frozen soils where it may not infiltrate, and being able to monitor that as well.
But a snowfall, since it melts slowly, often it soaks in a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it depends. It can be. Okay. It depends all on the antecedent soil temperature. If you've kind of been warm and you get a big snowfall, that's great for soil moisture because the soil's kind of melting a lot of that snowfall from the ground on top of whatever the sun's doing too, and so that soaks in really nice. I would say though, what we had last winter, without having a ton of measurements, wasn't an ideal situation because we got into our January polar vortex and really cold for a couple weeks, and that did freeze the soils. And then we got some of those snowfall events and they just stuck around for a couple weeks because of the cold. And I would say in that situation, really you lost most of your moisture kind of slowly evaporating each day instead of making it into the soil. But these are pretty complex things that we'll be able to monitor now, having those temperature and moisture probes at different depths. So it's going to give us a lot more insight during different parts of the season.
I'll never forget, we were having a dry summer, and I went up to a field day in northwest Missouri, and they'd been having a dry summer, but I kept noticing that their crops looked a lot worse than ours. So I got their field day book and realized they'd had 2 years of drought. They had not replenished their soil, the subsoil moisture, so they were really hurting.
Yes.
So we can kind of judge that too, is how bad are we really deficit?
Absolutely. So that's going to be very relevant for Missouri because another thing we then look at in the spring is, okay, usually the topsoil moisture is going to be there in March and April as long as we're having a normal Missouri spring. But coming off of drought years, and in this case, coming off of multiple drought years for a lot of our state, how's that deep moisture?
Yes.
Because that takes a longer time to recharge, and you really need a wetter pattern at that point. That's important because you might not need it immediately in April and May, but if you get dry, you're only going to go into drought quicker if you don't have some of that deeper moisture. And so that'll be another critical time of year where we'll be using that soil moisture. And then, of course, once you get into the season, just how is it responding to temperatures and precipitation as well.
So is the one at South Farm up that we can actually see it?
We have the sensors installed. The data are not up right now. So currently, we're kind of calibrating the sensors. Also waiting on some of the soil to settle too. So the way these are, it's really an interesting process, but it takes a long time to install. But they'll dig down into the pit and very carefully remove the soil in the order of the profile. Then once the probes are installed, they really backfill and tamp down that soil is in the right order as much as they can. But then we want to kind of wait on some rainfall events to see how the data is looking. By next spring, we should have the soil moisture at these stations available. But also as a part of the MOHIC project, the Climate Center is also working with MORAP, the Missouri Resources Assessment Partnership on campus. And we're looking to make high resolution soil moisture map. Even with soil moisture at these Mesonet stations, there's still lots of parts of the state that aren't going to have these data available to them. How can we use what's available as far as the soil moisture measurements, but then also look at some other data sets too? And so MOREP has a lot of experience with geospatial modeling, and so we're kind of looking at machine learning to use mixture of climate data, so knowing our rainfall and temperatures, but also combining that with the soil characteristics too, to try and model soil moisture. And so the end goal of the project is that by the end of next summer, we'll have 250 meter resolution maps that show a grid of the soil moisture and soil temperature across the state, and these would update daily. And we're really excited for those too, because it may not, it's a model, so it may not perfectly get at that soil moisture, but we are going to have some of the radar precipitation, and hopefully it can kind of dive into the local variations of soil moisture there. So that's another output of the project that we're excited about.
That's great. Yeah. We can better anticipate what kind of conditions that we're going to have now, don't we?
Yes.
With this. Back on your Mesonet, I use it a lot. And one thing I see is evapotranspiration. Can you explain to our listeners what that is?
Yes, evapotranspiration is the combined movement of water from the land surface to the atmosphere through evaporation, but also transpiration, which is plant water movement. So where plants are taking up water from under the soil and moving it into the plant and out through their stomata. And so evapotranspiration is basically how much water is moving from the ground to the atmosphere. The Mesonet, we calculate it hourly and come up with a sum for the day. And so usually in a hot summer day like today when we're recording, or a hot fall day, we might see up to 0.2 of an inch of evapotranspiration. And that basically means if you've lost the equivalent of a 0.2 inch rainfall event from your soil and water that day.
So that's more than an inch a week.
Yes, and in fact, that's really important during the summer.
Yes,
so,
I've seen 0.35s before in the summer.
Yes, and the higher the temperatures, the sunnier the conditions, that's when you're going to have the highest evapotranspiration. And we can have very high rates during the summer, particularly during drought, but a lot of times it's really useful to have that evapotranspiration as a water balance model, because our rule of thumb, just from taking the monthly average rainfall, is on average, we get about 1 inch a week of precipitation in the summer for rainfall anywhere across the state.
Which is a deficit.
Yes, exactly. And so if you're a farmer, you need to know that 1 inch on average you're losing water each week, even if you get an inch of rainfall. That gives you a better picture of where you're at from a water balance as far as dryness and wetness there. And so that's why we provide the evapotranspiration data. To do the calculation, we have incoming solar radiation that we monitor with the pyranometer, but then we have winds, humidity, and temperature as well, and are able to estimate it with those calculations.
Yeah, I always look at those and get depressed sometimes. Ooh, we are losing. But so that really tells us in the winter that's when we're going to build our soil moisture up.
Yes, and yeah, because you definitely don't lose much moisture at all compared to the summer, because you lose almost all of the vegetative component except for maybe some tree species, and then evaporation is just so much lower during the winter months. So it's kind of a bonus period where you can put a lot of rainfall and not worry about it being quickly removed and gone back to the atmosphere.
Oh, wow. So I think this helps you really, really see where your balance is. And I also noticed on the Mesonet, you do the feel like temperature.
Yes, yeah.
That made me feel really, really hot a few times. No wonder I feel so hot.
Yes, and that's a combination of the humidity and temperature there. But it gives us a better idea of what the temperatures actually are like outside. I think the past 2 or 3 years here in Missouri, we've had a lot of heat waves that might not have been as impressive on paper from temperatures, where we might see 90s or upper 90s, but it was the humidity that was extremely high and creating the more dangerous conditions. So that's why we include that as well. Because
our livestock producers, that's really important.
Yes. They don't want to know just temperature. Yeah.
That's not for Tim. That's for the livestock.
Yep. Animals get uncomfortable too. And so they're looking at that. A lot of factors, but the cattle definitely want to cool down at night too. And if we have really high humidity in those muggy nights. That's not helpful. But they also watch for, amount of sunlight, so how much the cattle are outside, and winds too. The winds can help kind of the cattle sweat and remove some of that heat.
We got to close up here in just a minute, but you mentioned nighttime temperatures. Those are going up, aren't they?
Yes.
Our daytime really aren't.
Yeah, it's been interesting, and our minimum temperatures are rising quite a bit. I get asked a lot, what's Missouri's temperature trend? And really over the past 40 years, but over the whole record, we are seeing rising temperatures. But in Missouri, it doesn't tell the whole story. You really have to break it down by season and then high and low temperatures. And basically, our coldest temperatures are getting warmer. Our warmest temperatures are staying the same or getting cooler. And so that means we're seeing more warming during the winter months, but also more warming with those overnight low temperatures. And so being higher as well. So
in the summer.
And so in the summer, our high temperatures are actually decreasing over the past 30 years, where minimum temperatures are increasing, and quite a bit more, so about 2 degrees per century over the past 30 years for the minimum temperatures. And so it kind of changes the flavor of summer heat, though. We're still getting heat waves, but all of our all-time temperature records that we set during the 30s and 50s, 100 to 110, we're not seeing that as much, but instead we're still getting these heat waves with a lot of humidity, but then not cooling down at night. So you might have a night where the low's 80.
Right.
And that can be just as bad for human, animal, and
plants.
Yeah, plants don't like that either as well. So that's an important trend to know, because if we just say temperatures are warmer, that doesn't tell the whole story. It's these nighttime temperatures.
And that's the beautiful thing about your Mesonet, is that you can measure all of those.
Correct. Yes.
And it's going to be different in the Boot Heel versus Northwest Missouri. They're different climates.
Absolutely. And we do see that. And we have really what we call 6 climate divisions across Missouri, ranging from the Boot Heel to the Northwest Prairie, as we call it, but very diverse state climatically, but also geographically too.
And probably the Ozarks are a whole animal themselves.
Yes. Yep. And they kind of have their own weird temperature records too, because of the topography as well. So you see some funny things in
Sometimes
the
they're cold.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right, Zach, we can talk about the weather all the time. It's so much fun, but thanks so much for coming out, and this is it for Tim's Take.
Thanks, Tim.